This Halloween video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Imagine being one of the most learned people in the world. You know everything. You're brilliant at mathematics and physics, chemistry and biology. You know every period of history off by heart, read several thousand books, and you know everything there is to know about religion, the ancient world, music, botany, philosophy and medicine. There's nothing seemingly left on this mortal coil to intrigue you. You've conquered every possible subject there is to master. So when you have nothing else to learn within the realm of the living, where else do you turn? Well, for Dr. Faustus, the answer was quite clear. He decided to learn the dark art of necromancy in order to summon the devil. This is the history behind the man who inspired Christopher Marlowe's Elizabethan tragic play and the danger and fears of a man who knew too much. The tragical history of Dr. Faustus was written around 1594. The protagonist, Faustus, is an embittered, solitary scholar from Wittenberg University and a doctor of theology, though he considers himself a polymath who is scholarly in many subjects from law to philosophy. Believing he's exhausted the confines of mortal knowledge, he challenges himself to master necromancy. He summons a demon called Mephistopheles and asks him to make a deal with Lucifer. Dr. Faustus asks that, for 24 years of infinite power and knowledge, he will exchange his soul to Lucifer. He signs the pact with his blood, and from there Faustus begins to revel in his powers. But we as the audience see the clock starts ticking away until the dramatic moment of final reckoning. Life indeed goes by very quickly, particularly when we are in the theatre. Now, whilst Dr. Faustus is primarily known through Marlowe's play as well as Goethe's, his presence in literature is quite astounding. Alexander Till's catalogue of references to Faustus runs to 1,152 pages, covering only the years up until the 18th century. And it's been estimated that 3 million printed pages have been devoted to Faustus, approximating 20,000 books. The story of Faust signing his soul to the devil in exchange for knowledge is actually not an original one. One of the earliest versions of the story feature the 6th century cleric Theophilus. Now he, like Faustus, sells his soul in exchange for worldly power, but unlike Faustus, he's redeemed later by the Virgin Mary, and canonised by both the Orthodox and the Catholic churches. Signing a contract with the devil is obviously a well-known trope of alleged witches, as well as many other medieval personages, such as Pope Sylvester II, who is said to have had a succubus named Meridiana. Now, his succubus not only satisfied his sexual needs, but also served as his advisor to many political and ecclesiastical matters, and helped him ascend to the papal throne. Sylvester was the first French pope, and he was rumoured to have studied magic and astrology via Islam, which may be one of the many reasons he aroused suspicion back in the day. According to the work of English monk William of Malmesbury, Gerbert, which is Sylvester's real name, learned the dark arts in Spain from a Saracen philosopher's book. According to the legend, Meridiana told Gerbert that he should never read Mass in Jerusalem, because the devil would come for him there. Thus, Sylvester II cancelled his pilgrimage to Jerusalem, but when he read Mass in the church of Santa Croce in Jerusalem, the Holy Cross of Jerusalem, in Rome, he suddenly found himself very ill afterwards. As he died, he asked his cardinals to cut up his body and scatter it across the city. Also, one version of the tale goes. In another version, he was attacked by the devil whilst he was reading Mass at the church, and the devil mutilated him, and he gave his gorged out eyes to demons to play with in the church. Repenting, Sylvester II then cut off his hand and his tongue. But before I get any further into the video, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it really easy for you to create beautiful websites, engage with your audience, and sell anything from products to content to time, all in one place and all on your terms. I've gone through so many iterations online, from blogging to running a business, and Squarespace has been my website throughout. They've seen all sides of my online evolution. I completely transformed my website. I think less than 45 minutes to do the whole website transformation, all thanks to Squarespace's fluid engine. And I'm also trying to work on creating my own courses in the future, and I can host all of that on my Squarespace website, which allows for members only content for my community, so I can sell access to online courses or blogs or videos and memberships, and purchases can be anything from one-time fees to subscription access. And when it comes to evolving my business, I can make smarter business decisions with Squarespace's intuitive built-in analytics tools, which lets me review my website traffic or learn where to focus engagement, track revenue from bookings or invoices and product sales, all in one place. So if you're interested, check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Lady of the Library to save 10% of your first purchase of a website or domain. Now technically, Marlowe's play is based on a German folk legend of Faust, who is based on a hard-to-pin-down historical figure, Johann Georg Faust, a German traveller, alchemist, astronomer and magician of the German Renaissance period. Now, for this discussion, I'm largely relying on the fantastic work of Dr. Leo Rukeby, because my god, did this man do a lot of work behind the figure. Highly recommend it, and I'll link it down below. Now, historians have come to accept that there probably was a real man called Faust, although there are some who don't believe it. But let's go on with the theory that he was a real man. Johann Faust lived between circa 1480 or 1466 to circa 1541. Now, because his identity is tied so closely to his folkloric legends, it's difficult to pick apart history from fact. And identifying this man historically is why there is quite a wide discrepancy between the birth years. You see, there are actually two Fausts in question when identifying this scholar. One was born in 1466 and the other in 1480 to 1481. And there are two recorded birth names, one with the first name Georg and the other Johann, and both of them were born in different places, one in Nicklingen and the other in Heidelberg. So Georg was active until 1505 and Johann was active until the 1530s. Now, why people go for the later date of his death is that there is a record of a Faust appearing as a performer of magical tricks and horoscopes in 1506, a year after Georg Faust's records ended. And over the next 30 years, there are many more records of a performer called Faust in southern Germany. Much like the Faustus of the legend, this Faust presented himself as a doctor of philosophy, an astrologist, alchemist, magician, and physician, leading to many calling him a fraud, and the church denounced him, claiming that he worked with the devil. As you can tell, there's a lot of other confusing, conflicting information, and this has led some scholars to believe that there were actually two magicians calling themselves Dr. Faust during this time. There are also dozens of grimoires and diabolical books of incantations and conjurations authored under his name, though these have been dismissed as forgeries produced after his death. Now, there's a reason to believe that Faust was christened Georg Sibelius, as well as many other accounts of a Gorgias or Gorgias causing a stir around the same time. There's a letter exchange between the German Benedictine abbot and polymath Johann Trithemius and the astrologer Johann Verdung, dated the 20th of August 1507. In the letter, Trithemius warns of a Gorgias Sibelius, a trickster and fraud who calls himself Faustus Jr. He's a necromancer, a palm reader, a diviner by earth and fire, astrologer and magician who claimed he could reproduce the miracles of Christ. Trithemius claimed he heard from the other local priests that Georg had boasted that if all the works of Plato and Aristotle, along with their philosophy, were to disappear from the human memory overnight, he, like the other Hebrew Ezra, would restore them all with increased beauty. Trithemius further alleged that this Sabellicus received a teaching position in Sickingen in 1507, but fled without persecution after engaging in sodomy with his male students. In the letter, Trithemius warned Virdung that, quote, "When he comes up to you, you will find him not a philosopher but a fool and a rogue who deserves to be thrashed." There is another documentation of a Gorgias Faustus by Conrad Mutianus Rufus, a German humanist in 1513, who noted he overheard the man boasting of his powers. There is also an interesting record in 1532 of a Dr. Faustus being denied entry to Nuremberg, as a junior mayor wrote that entry was to be denied to the, quote, "great necromancer and sodomite Dr. Faustus." Similarly, Johann Wehr, I know, everyone's called bloody Johann. Anyway, Johann Wehr was a Dutch physician and was among the first to publish a treatise against the trials and persecution of people accused of witchcraft. He told a story of how Faust sought revenge on a prison chaplain who claimed he'd run out of wine. Faust gave the man a miraculous salve which would remove his beard without a razor. But the salve was arsenic, which took off the skin and flesh of the man. I know, I've also used Nairn's hair removal too, it can do that if you leave it on too long. Wehr very much believed in Faust as a magician and not someone to be messed around with. He was no fraudster, and many other academics agreed. Joachim Camerarius, a classical philosopher at the university, wrote of Faust in 1536, noting him a respectable astrologer, and physician Philip Bergardi in 1539 praised Dr. Faustus's medical knowledge. Now, Philip Melanchthon, a German Lutheran reformer and a collaborator with Martin Luther, often presented himself and others as having a personal acquaintance with Faust, because Faust was featured in many of his stories, but whether or not the pair ever met is quite unclear. Faust, however, was incredibly useful to him as a story figure. He told a story of how Faust had flown over Venice before crashing dead near St. Mark's Square. Now, as a preacher, this was a pretty useful story, as it would have reminded his congregation of the arch-heretic Samaritan Gnostic wizard Simon Magus, who was known as the Bad Samaritan, who tried to buy his way into the power of the apostles. Simon Magus, like Faust in the story, engaged in a flying battle with the apostle Peter over Rome before falling to the earth, dead. There's also a story of Melanchthon coming downstairs of his home in Wittenberg to have dinner with Faust, offering him hospitality as a visiting academic. Now, naturally, Melanchthon wasn't very gracious to Faust, and he ordered him to give up his evil ways or face damnation. Faust, in return, threatened Melanchthon and told him that one day, when he went to the table, all the pots and pans would fly up the chimney and he would have nothing to feed any of his guests. Melanchthon replied that they better not, or I'll shoot you right in the art. Another very significant tale, if you've read the play by Marlowe, is Faust's alleged apparition of Homeric figures. You see, there's an alleged episode where Faust, whilst giving a public lecture on Homer at Erfurt, described the Homeric heroes so vividly that they seemed to have appeared before the students. Excited, the students demanded more, and Faust brought out each of Homer's characters, one after the other. Each hero looked upon the audience and shook their heads as if they were still on the battlefields of Troy. The students were thrilled, until Faust brought forward the Cyclops Polyphemus with a pair of man's legs hanging from his mouth. When Faust tried to send him away, he initially refused and banged on the floor with an iron spear. Now, this scene may have happened in terms of magic tricks. You see, it's likely believed that if this were the scene, Faust was using a magic lantern, similar to that invented by Paduan Giovanni Fontana, in which images were projected onto a wall. The scholars of the German Renaissance loved classical culture and did everything to align themselves with it. Melanchthon isn't actually his real name, it's a Greek translation of the original surname, Schwarzerz, meaning black earth. There's also another tale of how Faustus offered at a banquet to bring the lost plays of Plautus and Terenz back into existence for only a few hours so that they could be copied by the scholars present. But all the scholars refused the requests, believing that, technically, the devil would be involved, and thus the devil would have interpolated nasty things into the text, and thus they'd rather have no version of the ancient text at all. The final record we have of a Dr. Faust appears in June 1535, documenting his presence at Munster during the Anabaptist Rebellion, which is when the Anabaptists attempted to establish a communal sectarian government instead of the Holy Roman Empire, which at that point governed. Now, as I've told you all of that, you can probably see that there's a missing link here. You see, there isn't any written documentation of a Faust summoning a demonic spirit written during his lifetime. The first record of a demon named Mephistopheles wasn't recorded until 1580, but that date is rather unreliable because it comes from Carolus Batius's 1592 Dutch edition of Spy's 1587 Historia. What's more interesting is out of all of these tales that I told you, and there are many more references than just those ones that I told you, this so-called Faust was never tried for witchcraft. There are no records of a medically trained university professor tried and executed for witchcraft, despite his fierce presence in the writings of those who would have been involved in such procedures. I mean, what was protecting him? Academics and noblemen were always accused and tried of witchcraft during the period, so his status as an academic, nor his association with aristocracy, nor was his status as a man there to protect him at all. So does that mean that people were genuinely scared of the powers of a Dr. Faust? If he wasn't executed for witchcraft, what the heck happened to this historical figure? Well, no one knows exactly when he died, though most encyclopedias date it circa 1540, and that's rounded up. You know, he's mentioned in a Faust book in 1539 in an unflattering way, suggesting that he'd already been dead, but there are others that dated his death to 1541 and 1542 and 1538, etc. So most people rounded up to 1540. But how he died is where a lot of tales have sprung up, because that's where it's most interesting. In 1548, theologian Johann Georg, I know, another bloody Johann, wrote of Faust's death, writing, quote, "Nevertheless, he was allotted a miserable, lamentable end, for he was suffocated by Satan, whose dead body on the bier continually turned its face to the ground, notwithstanding that it was 5 times turned back." Now, in 1563, Manlius published the words of his master, Melanchthon, writing, quote, "In the middle of the night, the house was shaken, when Faustus did not get up in the morning, and by now being nearly midday, the host summoned others and entered his chamber to find him lying near the bed with his face turned down. In this way, the devil murdered him." Now, according to Rukeby, what's interesting about these two sources is that there's no reason to suggest that Gast or Melanchthon knew of one another or knew each other, yet both of their stories detail Faust's body being face down near his bed and attribute his death to the devil. Johann Georg, the Dutch physician I discussed earlier, wrote also that Faustus was found face down on the floor beside his bed, but he cited his source for this story, Philip Camamerius, who was the son of Joachim Camamerius, the classical academic I spoke of earlier, who wrote of the legitimacy of Faust's powers. In 1555, Melanchthon delivered a popular Sunday service about a magician's penance. He spoke of an unnamed nobleman of Regensburg who lived an extremely wicked life, practicing magic before going to church and becoming remorseful. He lived a life of piety in his old age, and on his deathbed he confessed that he made a pact with the devil, though he was confident that his newfound piety would protect him. However, as he drew his last breath, there was a rumbling of the house, and it seemed as though the house were to collapse. His friends fled the scene, but when they returned, they found the devil had twisted the dead man's face against his back. This story would have been a comfort to Christians at the time to know that there was no chance in hell, pun intended, that a magician who dealt with the devil could repent his way into heaven and be in the same room as them. But it's likely that Melanchthon once again used the legends of Faust to then inspire other teachings in the church. The amount of writings of this man's name suggests that there was a man going by this name. The extent of his powers, or how well he was able to trick people, will never truly fully be known. But now, he's a well-known global name, the name of the man who sold his soul to the devil, and that is a tale he's well known for, even though such a legend did not exist until long after his death. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you as always to my librarians. We have Lady of the Labyrinth, thank you for joining. We have Ellen, Ashley Nicole, Eric Taylor, Cody Martin, Yvonne and Yvonne, Jenny Eduvade, Marina, Psycho Teddy, Fritz Anderson, Wee Lauren, and Nicholas Reed and Andrea Bazil. Thank you ever so much as always. I've got lots of requests for videos over Halloween. I'm always open to more, so please, there is a Google form down below. You're welcome to submit any videos you'd like me to do. Let's face it, Halloween for me lasts the entirety of winter, so we shan't be stopping here. I hope you are happy and healthy, and remember, books save lives, so keep reading.